representation is good because it lets people, it's kind of like the days of Star Trek when you would see like a diversity of characters, like all people from different walks of life. Like they didn't show a lot of Black people in television unless they were entertainers, like musicians. And they definitely didn't put Black women in the spotlight, and they did that with Star Trek. And it was like you could see somebody who looked like you on the screen, or somebody who was like you on the screen. And so it's like it's a sort of validation when you, from what I've heard people talk about. And like for me, seeing in the modern age, seeing bisexual characters and trans characters, it's a little affirming that like that people of these communities are getting represented more, and that it's like kind of like not marginalizing them or othering them. It's making them part of stories in an intricate, like developed way.
You know, we live in a time now that's more accepting than it ever has been before. 20 years ago, the same thing could be said. 20 years before that, the same thing could be said. Now we look at media from 20 years ago and we go, yeesh, right? Like, no way could that media be made now. Like, that's so insensitive. But at the time, it was very forward thinking and it was good representation for its time. Again, in the 70s, you really start to see that turn and you start to see that questioned, and more honest representations of gay people start to come out. And it's kind of a push-pull, right? You see it grow slightly in increments, right? Like every generation's a little better than the generation before.
They're very quick to refer to the representation as being PC culture and yeah, like, and I'm just like, stop, like, really?
Weren't you dealing with homophobic fandoms just recently?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Chapter 1 of my rant. So yes, essentially. Most, like, I will talk in the context of this video, Star Trek fandom. Like, as much as I love the Star Trek fandom, there are so many toxic people in it. And I know this can be said about a lot of different fandoms, but when you are looking at a fandom of a show that's at a franchise that's arguably one of the most progressive franchises there are, like, it's really alarming to see the rampant transphobia. Especially, there's a lot of transphobia in the Star Trek fandom.
Yeah.
And there have been a lot of people making arguments that Star Trek Discovery is shoving sexual orientation and gender identity down people's throats because for the simple presence of characters. And the truth is, these characters are just existing. They're just inhabiting their environments. There is like maybe one episode where one person uses the incorrect pronoun for one of the non-binary characters and they correct them, and the person starts correcting themselves, and that's not an issue. It was just a moment of like, oh, okay, like, sure, you know. And of course, a lot of people who were against that took it and ran with it to the extent of like, well, they thought that it became an issue, like they were being inundated with progressiveness. Oh my goodness. See that the only unfortunate thing nowadays is that when there are very powerful voices who are speaking on behalf of these these groups who don't want to see LGBTQ plus characters, like they're emboldened by that, and that emboldens them to get louder. And we could do a whole separate stream about this, but I think this is another reason why representation is so important, though. It doesn't just benefit LGBTQ plus people. Representation benefits everyone else because they are able to see and have that exposure to people who actually do exist.
Look to your community, like look for your community. I think Mr. Rogers said, look for the helpers, right? Like look for your community, look for the people around you also who can help share in your journey. Like don't just, I mean, some of it's got to be a lone journey, of course, but I would say even, looking on the Wikipedia or whatever, that's maybe a good place to start. But also talk to people, that you feel comfortable with, that you feel safe around, and share your stories with them, because that's how we grow as a community. That's how we've always operated as a community.
masking is detrimental to autistic people's mental health. It's just is damaging. It leads us to have breakdowns and stuff like that. So I'm glad that I didn't experience that too badly. And I started unmasking, privately in my 20s. And in my 30s, I started to take the mask off. And it was around the time that I started spreading my affirmations for bullying victims message. I think a big issue is that non-autistic parents of autistic kids still struggle to see their child as a whole human person with all the emotions and all the things that come with being human. Because autism is not a shell around a person. It is the person. It is an integral part of them as much as their skin color. So autism parents, and I mean autism parents as in like the parents that are just really ableist and terrible about this, is that they pathologize every aspect of their child's behavior. Play becomes therapy. It's a battle to get their child to look, sound, and act as normal as possible.
Yeah.
And they focus so single-mindedly on their child's autism and how it makes their child different, rather than seeing them as a person feeling the same emotions that we all feel. Everything Autism Speaks does is lip service and superficial, because their ultimate goal is the removal of autism. So if anyone out there is thinking, wait, Autism Speaks was nice to me in response to being informed of this, please remember that a person who beats their spouse is still an abuser who beats their spouse. Even if they let you go ahead of them in line at Starbucks, they're still an abuser. Autism awareness, I swear, it's more about, look at me standing here for autistic people, blah, blah, blah. And it's less about, hey, let's listen to autistic people, which is what the autism acceptance is about. Because awareness says, it basically says, look at all these symptoms and all these problems. And acceptance says, these are people, let's listen to them. Because they're people just like you.
Queer people exist. And so how do you take that out of your lesson plans? How do you take that out of life and out of discussions? It's like not being able to talk about people of color, or not being able to talk about Muslim people, or not being able to talk about any other faction of humanity.
But even worse than that, like, imagine if you're a teacher and you're LGBTQ. Like, can you talk about your relationships at all, or like who you are as a person? Like, do you have to hide who you are at school? Does that mean they're going to try to get you fired because you are in that group? Like,
right?
How far does it go? And that's like the biggest thing is like, how damaging is this going to be?
Yeah. If I'm a gay teacher and I'm married, can my partner now not come to school functions?
Or
right?
What if children have two LGBTQ plus parents? And are they expected to just not talk about their life at all at school? Are they expected to just walk through those doors and completely ignore the fact that both parents are a part of their of this community? Like, that's really unsettling in so many different ways. It makes me realize that we are existing in this reality where there are entire states where large groups of people still think that it's completely acceptable to erase and silence entire communities, especially the LGBTQ plus community. And like, and the question that keeps going around in my mind is like, how far does it have to go until it becomes a universal thing? Because when one state does something, like, it almost becomes like a model or a template for other bodies, other political bodies, to do the same thing.
These laws get passed is because the majority of people who are representatives in power are cis, white, heterosexual men. All it does is it makes kids not trust their teachers because they're not safe to talk to anymore. So they can't talk to their parents. They can't talk to their teachers. They can't talk to their principal. They might not even be able to tell their friends what's going on because their friends might out them or do something. So they're like holding on to all of this stuff, all of these feelings, and they may not be able to go anywhere with that. I mean, how is this going to affect them mentally?
And because we're othering, because we're saying there's something inherently dirty, there's something inherently wrong, there's something inherently ugly about what you're doing. So then all that does is that opens the door to drugs and, you know, illicit sex work where you're putting yourself in dangerous positions. Sex work is work, but this is, I'm not talking about regulated, safe sex work. I'm talking about young people having no place else to go and ending up on the street. I've seen it. The government trying to say, well, you know, it's all about sexuality. It's like, is it? Or is it about who you love? Like, you're the ones that are making this about sex. We're talking about the person I'm in love with.
Being LGBTQ plus is more than who people are intimate with. It is about how we survive day to day. It's about how we express ourselves. It's about how not only our community perceives us, but the community outside of our community perceives us as well. And our survival is inherently connected to all of those different variables. So why should that not be acknowledged, right?
We do over time become more liberal. We do over time become more liberal with a lowercase L. We do become over time more, you know, more left-leaning, more open, more accepting of different peoples. It's like, you know, reversing Roe versus Wade and illegalizing abortions isn't going to make abortions go away. It's going to make safe abortions go away. You know, criminalizing gay people isn't going to make gay people stop being gay. It's going to make it criminalized. So you're turning people, honest people, good people, into criminals for no reason because of your moral high ground.
Moral high ground.
Moral
right?
high ground. Yeah, your high horse that you're on.
And like basically laws like this, like the Don't Say Gay bill, and like where they can businesses can refuse based on their religious beliefs. It's basically trying to state a false premise that gay is a choice.
One thing that I always have, especially like the cis heterosexual men in my life, tell me, they always tell me, Donny, I didn't know what gay people were like until I actually met a gay person. I know there are instances where you may not feel comfortable enough speaking up, but we need you to do that because as LGBTQ plus people, like many of us are willing to fight. But when you are facing foes on multiple different fronts, juggling your own trauma, like that's a lot to handle, right? So that's why we need allies who are vocal and who are active and engaging and participatory, because without them, like we need that support essentially.
Right.
And it's basically you should go from, and they mention this in other marginalized communities, that you not just need to not be an ally but an accomplice. And so like speaking up and doing something about it makes you an accomplice.
Well, and us having this platform, I think we need to have these conversations. If nothing else, like the first thing Donny said to me when we, you know, started up the conversation tonight is backstage, he said to me, you know, I've been kind of a wreck. I've been thinking about this all day and it's been kind of dominating my day. And you shouldn't feel alone and you shouldn't feel isolated and you shouldn't feel like that. We need to share this time together. That's another thing we can do, right? Is be here for each other and talk to each other and love each other and extend that grace to each other. Because if you can't pick up that yoke, maybe I can help pick it up with you. And together we can carry it.
Education and having conversations about LGBTQ plus history is what helps undo these types of mindsets that lead to these horrible bits of legislation. Ari,
Right, the problem with it that is you have the Don't Say Gay bill also being talked about, where they remove that ability to have conversations about stuff from the table, so you can't even discuss it. So it's sort of like an extra invalidation of some kind that, like, because you can't talk about it, you can't educate people, and you can't get that baseline to change the laws.
Yeah. But it's also like having these conversations is important, like, and being open to these kinds of conversations
before
and
it's taken away.
And as simple a gesture as us having our pronouns up on the screen. That is a statement. That is an education. That is an acknowledgement.
forcing people to internalize things, like, it's almost like breathing. It's such a deep conditioning, right?
Right.
And it
And
starts
it's
very,
scary.
very early. It starts
It
basically at birth.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and it's just passed off as, like, tradition, right? Like, that's
Mhm.
how it's kind of decorated, which is it's scary, I think.
Sherri, you were talking about how your dad would say that boys don't play with dolls, they play with action figures. I feel like
Actually, my brother said that. So
oh,
my
your
brother
brother
had
said
it. My brother said that, but where did he learn that? Was from
Mhm.
my father. My father. So my brother was not running, jumping, climbing trees kind of boy by nature. We were both indoorsy kind of kids. I was, if anything, I was the more outdoorsy, more adventurous one between the two of us. And my father still to this day thinks it's hilarious to talk about how he took us both, because he used to coach baseball, little league baseball, and he thought it was hilarious because he would take us both out there and he wanted to turn my brother into into being the bat boy and, picking up the bats after they're thrown. But my brother was scared by that, because the bats were flying at his face. And so dad always says, and of course this is not actually what happened, but my dad always thinks it's hilarious that, you were out there grabbing the bats and bringing them back, and your brother was under the stands playing with the dolls with the other girls. Dan probably did shy away from it because he was always that kid. He was like, you'd throw the ball at him and he'd be like, and freak out, and like something's flying at my face. Like, that's a protective thing that he would have. That's actually kind of natural and normal. But my dad saw that as weak and inferior and female in some way. So,
Mm.
where did my brother get that? Then later when we were growing up, he had all the Star Wars action figures. And once they came out with the taller ones, the 12-inch ones in the 80s, I was like super excited because I was like, oh, I have Barbies. We can play dolls together. And I was shot down. And my brother was like, these are not dolls. These are action figures.
he wanted to please your dad
Right?
because he didn't want to be considered playing with dolls because
Mhm.
it wasn't considered boy behavior.
The first distinct example of toxic masculinity that I can think of was when I was in kindergarten. I wanted to play house
Mm.
in class, because like obviously, like, in kindergarten there's like different centers throughout the classroom where you can like do different things. I wanted to play house. Like, I wanted to pretend that I was cooking food. I wanted to pretend that I was cleaning. And I remember being grabbed by the arm out of the like house playing area and put in timeout for an entire day. It all centers around shame. Like, shame is such a powerful conditioning tool,
It really
Mhm.
is.
and it's used against children so much. And even in therapy now, like, I find that there is so much that I have to unravel with regard to those layers of trauma, right?
Because there's that weird expectation of stoicism, right? To
Mhm.
be stoic and to just like suck it up and just take it in. And it's just
Pull
not
yourself
fun.
up by the bootstraps, kind of
Oh,
a
don't even get me started on bootstrapping.
Well, since
yeah.
coming out as non-binary, I do notice that I don't want to appear too feminine,
Mhm.
and that means crying in public. Like, I go to movies and I'll cry during the movie, but then I'll like make sure that I look okay when the lights come up because I don't want anyone knowing that I cried or that I was upset during the movie because I don't want to show that
Yeah.
weakness.
When I was 11, this was shortly after my brother came out. I was going to go, there was a school next door that was closed. It was just an empty building. And I was going to go throw a baseball against the school because I was bored and I was a kid. I was just going to practice my pitch and just kind of do something physical outside. And so I was wearing what you would wear to go play baseball or go play with the ball. I was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt and a baseball cap over my head and went outside. And my mom was in tears because she was dealing with my brother being gay because somehow that made her a bad parent. And she stopped me and said to me, it's bad enough. And these words are seared into my brain. It's bad enough that I have a son that wants to be a daughter. I don't need a daughter that wants to be a boy. Go upstairs and put on a dress.
I will never forget a moment that I had with my dad, like after I came out, like, it was very difficult for my family. Like, they were having a really hard time accepting it. And my dad had a moment where he broke down. And I don't often see my dad cry, but he broke down, and he, of course, blamed himself. Like, he was like, what did I do wrong? Did I not go fishing with you enough? Did I not hunt with you? Like did I not play ball? Like, these like very traditional masculine, at least what we're taught to be traditional masculine things when we're kids, right? And I told him, like, that's not it at all. Like, I literally, like, gutting a deer is not going to convince me to, you know, not like men. Like, they're
Right.
like, it has nothing
Right.
to do with it, right? And I'd be a little concerned if it did have anything to do with it.
I wore this X-Men baseball cap all the time, and my sister said that I was trying to be a boy, and I had to be like, no, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. But I used to get that all the time, and it got to the point of where I was wearing the hat, and my hair got extremely matted, like it got snarls in it and stuff, and my mom had to cut my hair really short, and she made me feel so bad because she said that I looked like a boy doing it. So I just don't wear hats anymore because that's considered a boy trait.
I take huge issue with the term straight acting, because to me it just panders to that dynamic, that social acceptability of, like, well, being straight and behaving straight is more acceptable. Obviously,
Right.
I've had my issues with that.
Well, and I was talking about this before when we were in the back room, that, like, saying that someone is straight acting talks about the fact that, like, men have this idea that being gay, you're, like, feminized in some way, or that if you act a certain way, that you're taking on a gender role of being a woman, or a woman. And that straight men are hyper masculine and real men. So it's a little transphobic, it's a little sexist, and it definitely doesn't allow, it kind of like pigeonholes gay people into like a certain role and like a certain, you know, way to live.
It's still kind of buying into the binary, right? And buying into traditional heteronormative roles, you know, gender roles and relationship roles. And it's not allowing for, you know, something that you'd said, you know, in the back room also was, you know, how there's like the traditional female role and the traditional male role. And it's kind of trying to pigeonhole people into one of those, regardless of your gender expression, regardless of your sexual orientation. And it's like, but that's not how the world works. You know what I mean? Like that's not how even heterosexual relationships have to work, much less, you know, gay relationships. I remember that was actually one of the first things when I was very young. You know, I asked my brother, innocent child question, you know, like, you know, who's the guy, who's the girl in your relationship? And my brother was like, well, that's not how it works. You know, he's like, you know, we're just partners and we just, you know, take on whatever role, you know, we all take care of everything together.
I kind of feel like for gay men, certain spaces like Grindr are often our only spaces where we feel safe, right? And I think that safety kind of, or that mirage of safety, let's just say, kind of gives way to like other waves of toxicity that people don't often see. And I would say that toxic masculinity is one of those examples. That because there's like a certain degree of like anonymity in that space, like that a lot of gay men think that it's acceptable to say things like that, and of course, like, it's not just about saying things, like these people are literally thinking these things. So there's a conditioning there, right? So it like makes the issue even more insidious, right? Because like, it's like, where does that conditioning come from? How far has it been, or how long has it been happening? Well, and what makes this so scary, and I know that this happens far more often in the trans community, but when there is that drive to fit that binary, right? Like it can almost become self-destructive. Like for me, like I wanted to deepen my voice so much that I literally tried destroying my voice. I would like go outside and like scream into something to try to just make my voice sound haggard as possible. I would like, there was a period of time where I tried smoking because I would read that like, oh, smoking will like
gives you a gravelly masculine voice.
Right.
And of course, like I tried smoking for a while, but it just was not for me. Like some people can smoke, I can definitely not. There was a point where, like physically speaking, there was a point after I got so much criticism for my long hair, like I cut it all off. Like, Ari, you probably remember this in college,
do,
like
yeah.
the great hair
Shocking.
debacle. Yeah.
When I was a little kid, like a little kid, I was the tomboy type, so I always wanted to play with the boys and the girls, but most of the time I just wanted to play with the boys. And so I would get bullied because I'm just a girl. What are you doing here? Why are you, is it because you're, like you had that I had ulterior motives or something for, wanting to play with the boys and like kind of like go over that gender barrier. So it was just a lot of like BS. And like with my weight too, my parents would do microaggressions against me too that like I didn't really think about. Like, you should wear dark clothing. Oh, your tummy's starting to hang out. Like, maybe you should do some sit-ups and that'll help you. Or like, maybe you should run more, or maybe you should do this more, or maybe like, or every time I would see my grandmother, she would like kind of like do some lip service and like slap me on my butt and go, "Oh, are you losing weight?" And it's like, "No, Grandma, I'm not losing weight."
And you have such a pretty face.
Oh, that's another one. Yep.
Backhanded compliment.
You have such pretty eyes.
Mm-hmm.
You have a great personality.
I was like very little in high school, so I was often bullied for like being like really short. I was bullied for my voice at length. I sometimes was bullied for like the various things that I would like or that I would obsess over, which I ended up being definitely a loner at certain points because of that. But like honestly, my worst bullying experiences center around instances of public humiliation where I would have people like publicly shame me or physically harm me or do a whole variety of different things like that, to the point where I did not even want to be seen in public because I was afraid that some public horrible thing would happen. And thank goodness for therapy, because that's been helping me with a lot of those residual issues that I'm realizing I still have from a long time ago because of that. So I used to work at a coffee shop for like 10 years, and in my hometown, mind you, one of my high school bullies who like physically assaulted me in high school came in. I had to serve this person and they gave me like this half-hearted apology.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, "Donny, I never realized you'd gone through that." And in my mind, I'm like, "Well, you caused it, so." Are there any words of encouragement for people in a situation where they are being bullied? We've already kind of shared one, right? Like, your feelings are valid. Are there any other ones you can think of?
Well, like I said, reach out to a professional, and because your feelings are valid, and you deserve someone to listen to you and to be on your side and to be working on your team.
Right.
You deserve to have that person that's, walking alongside you and helping you down this path.
Yeah. I will reiterate what my therapist has told me, and I've mentioned it before. You have permission to exist and inhabit in the spaces that you're in.
Isn't that beautiful?
And when my therapist told me that, I cried all the way home, because the one thing that bullying does is it one robs you of your voice.
Mm-hmm.
It minimizes you, erases you, and it makes you feel like a lot of the time that you don't deserve to exist. So hearing that from someone is so unbelievably important. And if you have people in your life who are making you feel like you don't belong or don't deserve to exist, know that we right here in this space love you and support you and want you to know that you matter.
No matter what happens or what you think about yourself or how you feel, just know that you are loved.